I don't know who you are, but welcome to the Irish Photography Podcast. Sit back, relax, and listen about cameras, gear, settings, stories, and all things photography. Join Darren on Ireland's Best Photography Podcast. Let's go.
And you're very welcome to episode 163 of the Irish Photography Podcast. My name is Darren, I'm your host, and I'm joined by somebody on the complete opposite side of the world today. It took me a number of weeks, but we finally got there in the end, and I'm delighted to welcome to the Irish Photography Podcast, Rachel Gillespie. Rachel, how's it going?
Hey, how's it going on the other side of the world? It's night time for you and morning for me. So
so good morning and good night, good afternoon and good evening. Yes,
exactly.
It took us a number of weeks, but you know what? I'm delighted to have you on here and to kind of hear your story in relation to photography, because I know it's going to be an interesting story, and I'm looking forward as well for you discussing, you know, the different aspects of how photography has changed you and the people around you as well, because that's for me what I love about photography. You know, it's a hobby, but it's something that you can get really immersed into, and I think, you know, your story is going to really give us an insight into that. I hope, anyway.
I hope so too. No, it's amazing. I'm really excited because I've listened to a number of your podcasts on Spotify, and I was like, "Oh, this is so cool!"
Brilliant.
And of course, the laughs is always a nice added bit to a photography podcast.
Yeah, you
can't
know
be all too serious all the time.
You can't be all too serious. No, you have to have a joke now and then. You know what I mean? So hopefully we can find a few jokes as well as we go through today. And I think,
absolutely.
With that in mind, I suppose, you know, before we even go any further, who is Rachel?
Wow, yeah, great question. I am a female astrophotographer, but also have sort of pretty much turned into a landscape photographer as well. I pretty much say I'm an adventure photographer, and that's my logo, because all the places I go are pretty epic. You know, people come from all over the world to go to the places that are just down the road for me. So pretty lucky and blessed in that way, I guess. And I'm a mum. I have 3 amazing children, and they are 15, 13 and 10. So my life is pretty busy, and I've been raising them on my own for 10 years. So photography is my passion and my escape as well, I guess, to a fair degree. And I've just been absolutely so lucky to make it into a business and make it into a life. And, you know, I'm pretty dedicated to my camera as much as I am to my family. So, I feel like all the journey I've been on has actually taken me here, and I've got so much more to still do, but pretty cool to be able to be a full-time photographer in this industry, especially in this current times.
Absolutely. You know, I think the camera is something that we have in our hand, and we take it for granted to a certain extent, but it can bring you to so many different places and allow you to meet so many different people and see so many different sites. And that's, I think, the big draw that people have from adventure photography, as you call it, because, you know, there's so many different types of photography that's out there, but the outdoors is something for me anyway. And I've said a number of times on the podcast is that, you know, I will never do anything other than outdoor photography, because I don't have to pose a rock. I mean, a rock is going to stand there for me, you know?
Yeah.
And when you can see so many different sites and scenes and capture them in an image, I mean, for me, that's when you can look at them afterwards. It brings back the memories. So it's interesting you say, you know, that it has changed your life, because it does. Every decision that you make in life right up as far as this point has led you to the moment that we're here talking right now. And we're going to talk about photography and how immersive it can be, I suppose. And that's an interesting thing in how we kind of get started in photography, because it's not something that you start out and go, this is what I want to be for my career. So how did you get started in photography?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. And, you know, you just said a couple of things that really spoke to me as well. So, like, I started out actually working in tourism, had my own travel magazine, and I had always just taken pictures with my phone. But mind you, prior to that, in my early 20s, I had travelled overseas and, taken photos with a film camera, but I certainly wasn't a photographer at that point. And so, I just, through my travel magazine, I just got in connection with a lot of photographers because I wanted pictures. Okay. And then I was sort of like, okay, my model is that I'm only having high-end pictures. That's the only thing that's going to happen in my magazine. I'm not having any mediocre photography. So I was very
Good
lucky
idea.
just through, I guess, a bunch of what I'd call universe guiding me or whatever,
Hmm.
to meet some really amazing New Zealand photographers who are at the top of their game. And one of those photographers was a guy called Mark G from The Art of Night,
Okay.
who is very well known in New Zealand for astrophotography. So he lived in Wellington. I lived in Kaikoura, which is basically across this Cook Strait, so between the two islands of the North and the South Island of New Zealand. And you can actually see the Kaikoura Ranges from Wellington, which is our capital city in New Zealand. And he had taken this amazing picture, idiosyncrasies and things that happen in divine timing. He'd taken this picture of the Kaikoura's sunset and posted it on social media, and somehow or other it popped up in my news feed, and I was like, oh wow, that's a cool picture. And I just messaged him and said, hey, would I be able to share that picture on my Facebook page? And he was like, yeah, sure, go for it. So I had no idea who he was. I knew nothing about astrophotography. I'd never even really had any concept of the whole thing. And went and had a look at his page to tag him in. And I was like, oh, wow, this is cool. This is a whole nother world that I don't know about.
Hmm.
And then I realized where I was living, and a lot of other places in the South Island particularly, is around the dark skies, the International Dark Sky Reserves, which we have here, which are
Hmm.
pretty, something I'll talk about later, which are pretty exceptional. And, until you get into this sort of thing, you don't even know they exist.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I was like, wow, this is cool. This is amazing. Who is this guy? So I started sort of, having a good old snoop around on social media.
As you do. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, oh wow, I love this whole astrophotography thing. What is this? So I literally, it was in a time in my life when I had first become a single parent, and I had a lot of passion and drive to be successful because I had no other option, basically.
Hmm.
And I just said to him, hey, would you come and do a workshop down here? And he was like, yeah, why not? And I was like, okay. So it was just one of those scenarios where I got propelled kind of into it real quick.
Wow.
Um, I'm passionate about the stars and the Milky Way. I've got quite a connection with spirit and things in terms of my energy, and I've always had that. And I didn't really understand much about how that impacted me as an astrophotographer at the start, but now I do.
Hmm.
And the Milky Way galaxy has always been something I've been fascinated by, but didn't really understand much about at that time. And so we went on this big, long-winded couple of year journey of working together. And so I became his, doing a lot of his social media. I did all his Twitter and Facebook and ran all that for him. So he
Wow.
actually works for Weta Digital, which makes all the big movies out in Hollywood for like Avatar
Oh, wow.
and all of that, and Peter Jackson movies. So yeah, it was just really cool connection, and we became really good mates. And he helped me quite a lot with my business in terms of supporting, what I was trying to achieve, which was so
Hmm.
cool. And
Hmm.
I'd always known, because I'd always been in business for myself, about joint ventures and just having people that you could work together with,
Uh-huh.
um, etc. And I learned a lot of really cool things. So. And I'll talk a bit more about social media later too, because I think that's also something that's changing rapidly at the moment, and it's quite interesting for photographers because we can get so caught up with all of that, and it's not even
Hmm.
important.
Hmm.
Especially now in life, it's not important, but it's useful. It's a tool.
It
Yeah.
is. It is. And you know what's interesting? You said there about, seeing one photograph and going, wow, look at this from a sunset point of view. And then you kind of learn about the stars. I mean,
Yeah.
most people, when they first take an astrophotography photograph, to go, wow, is this there all the time? Yeah, it's there all the
Yeah.
time. You just don't see
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
And it's a whole different world per se, or many different worlds if you want to look at it in that way, because you're looking out into the past, you're looking out into the distance of space. And like astrophotography is not an easy genre from a photography point of view to get into, but when you get into it, it's amazing because it just completely opens your eyes to the things that have always been there, but
Yeah.
you never even know would exist. And I remember when I first started in photography, there was a guy, he's based in Tenerife, Nico Martin was his name, and he was a phenomenal photographer. And I remember looking at the time going, wow, geez, if only I could get photographs like that. You know, and I was
Yeah.
thinking, I would never have been able to get it here in Ireland, but you can, but I would never even thought that I could have ever had it possible
Yes.
until I go out there and put myself in the scene to go, no, let's see what I can see. Now, of course, clouds, you know, Ireland, we're famous for our clouds. So that is one challenge that we have from an astrophotography point of view. But I mean, it's definitely something that I think by getting out into the outdoors and getting out at night, you're in a whole different time sphere, let's just say, because
Oh, absolutely.
you're on the night shift when everybody else is kind of on the day shift. And like when you mentioned about astrophotography, have you got a style, or have you tried other types of photography? Have you done, you know, the traditional, say, weddings, you know, christenings and portraiture and stuff like that, or have you just always been outdoor?
Yeah, yeah, good question. Yeah, so no one told me astrophotography was hard, so I didn't know that. I was just like, oh yeah, cool, I'll do this. um, yeah, so people used to say this to me all the time when I started, like, wow, you're doing that as your first genre, and I'm like, yeah, and what's that about? Like, I didn't even know.
Yeah.
So I suppose that was part of me. It's kind of my personality. I'm a bit of okay, I don't know quite exactly all how to go about it, but I'm going to do that.
Give it a
So
go.
it's just how I think. I think
Yeah.
I'm very creative. I'm very visually oriented. I'm not that technical, but I have a 50-50 left-right brain, so I can actually learn the technical and teach it and all of that, which I do in my work now. But
Mm-hmm.
a lot of at the start, I was honestly winging it. Like, I was just like, okay, show me what to do. What are the settings? How do I do it? And I think because of where I was at in my life, I personally, I just was so excited. And I think a lot of what I created was just total immersion into astrophotography, because I virtually spent all my time outside of being a mum listening to podcasts, watching YouTube videos, talking to photographers. I actually ended up closing my magazine down just to be a professional photographer
Wow.
after about 2 years, which is real quick. So
Mm-hmm.
it was interesting because I'll talk about that too a bit later. But you know, entering an industry where you have no experience, people were quite interesting to deal with at times.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But that didn't faze me. I just was like, you know what, I've got the results. I'm going to do this. I don't quite know how it's all going to happen, but I'm going to get
Mm-hmm.
into it and give it a go. I've
Give it
got
a go.
nothing
Yeah.
to lose. So I started out with I bought a Canon 6D Mark One, and I bought a 24-105
Good choice.
f3.5 lens. And then a guy I know, Chris Pigman, who was quite a good photographer here, he gave me, because I couldn't afford to buy anything else, so it was all the money I had.
Mm-hmm.
He gave me an Astro lens, and it had a bit of a slight issue with it where the focal ring was a slight loose. So every single time I took a photo, I had to refocus every single
Wow.
time. Now, at that moment, I had no idea that was quite a big deal. I just was like, oh, yeah, this is what I've got to work with, so this is what
Yeah.
I'll do, you know.
Yeah.
I had the shittiest tripod you've ever seen. It was just a wee travel tripod. That was all I could afford. So I was like, righto, this is what I've got. And I was looking
Yeah.
around me at all the people who had all this, you know, $50,000 worth of camera gear.
Uh-huh.
And I'm like, well, I don't have that, but I do know that I've got talent and I've got tenacity and determination. And so if I'm going to make this work, what I've got to do is go out more times than everyone else, do more clicks than everyone else, practice, learn, listen, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And I reckon that was actually the making of my photography way back then. And so I often go back to that. I often take myself back. I'm like 5 years down the track now, which is still quite new. But I often take myself back to, let's just keep it simple, go back to the basics. I shoot quite different now than I did then. Like back then, people were shooting 30 seconds sort of exposures, whereas now I'm probably more 15 to 20 seconds to get a sharper star and all that. So I didn't know all that back then, but it didn't matter.
Yeah.
So I was super lucky on the first time I went out for a whole week in the Araki Mackenzie area, which is a gold rated dark sky reserve.
Okay.
Um, I was just with a mate of mine who was a photographer. He taught me some stuff. I'd already been working with Mark, and then I had this one guy who was a client of mine who wanted to go on this week adventure, and I was like, yeah, sure, I'll take you. So
As
I
you do,
was
yeah.
just like, okay. And so I took my mate with me who was, Talmud Madsen. He was really good at photography, and we all got on real well. And we just had this incredible week. It was like, the gods were looking down on us basically, because we went to Lake Tekapo, Church of the Good Shepherd. We went to Araki Mount Cook National Park. We walked into the Hooker Valley, which is where Araki Mount Cook is, into the lake there. That was a really amazing time. It was -9 Celsius. We had crampons, and we met all these other amazing photographers on the track, which is like a 1.5 hour walk in. I didn't even know who these people were, but now when I look back on it, going, wow, that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
people like
yeah.
Will Patino and
Oh, very good.
Laren from Shadow and Shade, and people like that who was just like, oh wow, they're actually really good photographers. I didn't even know who they were at the time. So we had a lot of fun, and we, that was my first real amazing Astro shot, was in there. And then we went back to Twizel, which is where Lake Ruataniwha is, where there's a really good aurora spot. We got a KP7 aurora. There was
Nice.
people like Lee Cook and Rachel Stewart and Daniel Murray and people like that were around the area, because basically what happens here is everybody kind of gets out in the region at the same times of the year, when the Milky Way is in the right place and all the rest of it. And so that we kept bumping into all these amazing New Zealand photographers who are, real successful. And we're all taking these pictures together, and it was just like total stoke, and everybody was just so excited. And I don't know, it was one of those times in your life where nothing else mattered. You were just like in the zone.
Yeah.
Then we went to Queenstown, Lake Wanaka, did a sunrise doors off heli adventure around Mount Aspiring, Tatatea,
Nice.
which is like an amazing place as well. Just got some incredible shots. I literally was just like, shit, I don't even know what I'm doing here. I'm just going to stick my camera out the window and give it a whirl, honestly.
Brilliant.
Yeah. And so, that was my reference point for what's possible. And so I posted like 10 pictures on my Instagram the next week, and everybody was going crazy, like, what on earth's going on? Did you take these pictures?
Wow.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. And then I was like, maybe I've actually got some talent for this. So that was kind of the whole thing about being, I made a choice to be away from my children for a week. I made a choice to invest that money. I made a choice to back myself. And I was very teachable, because I think that's a real crucial key aspect to, who doesn't want to grow their photography and improve every time you go out. I'm sure most people do. And I'm still like that, totally teachable, always really excited to listen to what other people are doing. I don't believe that I have all the answers by any means, and yet constantly learning about new gear and new ways of doing things, and it's just so exciting and fun. So that was kind of my introduction to it. And then I was like, actually, maybe I really need to think about, what I want to do with this. And at that time, I had a lot going on in my life. My dad passed away, and I sort of moved to a different place because I wanted to be close to my mum. And then I was like, what would Dad want me to do with this? He would support me in living up in the Mackenzie country, and living my dream, because he was really amazing like that. And I decided to move there. So I moved and lived in the Dark Sky Reserve, so I could basically propel myself, moved my children, packed up everything on a trailer, moved to the Dark Sky Reserve, put my kids in the new school, and lived there for 2 years prior in 2018-19, prior to COVID. And that changed my life really, because I started working with big luxury lodges doing astro guiding, which no one else was doing. I was the only person in the region that was actually offering that at the time
Very good.
as a photographer, like as a as an independent photographer. Quite a few people do it now, but that just propelled me into the industry. I got headhunted by quite a few companies, and at that time, I was still probably winging it a fair bit. And I got a lot of I got a lot of jealousy and stuff too, which was really interesting. I had to deal with that. You can imagine what that can be like sometimes. And being female astrophotographer is actually quite an interesting thing here. It's
Okay.
getting better. It's getting better, but back then it was quite an unusual thing to be doing as a business. There's heaps more women doing it now these days, but yeah, it was awesome. And so I got to work with, these amazing clients from the Ahuriri Valley, which is out in the middle of nowhere. It's probably the darkest place in the South Island I've been to so far.
Okay.
And it's just on the edge of the Dark Sky Reserve, but at the Lindis Lodge. And they had these amazing clients, people from the US who were, FBI and all sorts of crazy scenarios.
Wow.
They just wanted to come out and see the Milky Way because they'd see 6 stars in the sky from San
Light
Francisco
pollution.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And they were so down to earth. And, I've always believed that everybody's the same. No one's better than me or whatever. And so we'd just go out and we'd all just be nobodies, if you know what I mean, under the stars. And it was so cool. And they just absolutely were so excited to see these things, and a lot of the time they'd just lie down on the ground and lie there
just
and
take it all in.
So then it became like a thing where it wasn't lost on me how amazing it was, and so that kind of, I think, propelled my heart and soul more into photography in a way where I realized that this is actually an incredible opportunity for me to change my life. Because I pretty much started from scratch after I left my husband. I went through domestic abuse and women's refuge. I had to start over. And, it gave me the drive and ambition. So I had a really amazing business going. And then 2020 came along and completely ruined that. So
2020,
that is how, but, in hindsight, it was a pretty tough time. But in hindsight, that was when I started doing workshops with Kiwis. So, sometimes you look back and go, okay, that was tough. However, look what I've actually created next. And now we've got this, whole new vibe going where people are starting to come back here and, tourism is starting to become more of a thing. And, we've had our borders closed for a long time. So that's really affected the whole country because we're only 5 million people. It has a massive impact on the entire nation. It's not just a small thing for us.
Yeah, for sure.
A lot of people have been through a lot here, like everywhere, I guess, but everyone knows somebody who's lost their business. Everyone knows somebody who's lost a person, etc. It's, it's a small place. And so I think what I'm starting to realise now even more is that I'm still here. A lot of people are not. I've still got my business. Yes, it's been a challenge, but, all the stuff I've been through in my life, this has prepared me for this because I'm tough. COVID's not the worst thing I've been through. So, you know.
And you know what? I think you hit on a couple of interesting things there, about like not having to rely on the externals, let's just say, of people coming in from tourism point of view to be able to do it with Kiwis. And like you've mentioned a number of places there to me that roll off the tongue, but I've never heard of them before because it's on the other side of the world. But they're areas, I'm sure, that they're absolutely drop dead gorgeous and epic places. I mean, it's handy in a way, as you say, for your playground to be so incredible. But the fact that you moved to a dark sky area to completely immerse yourself in that, I think, is number one, hats off, because you could say, okay, I could do all this commuting back and forth. No, what's the point? Let's immerse myself completely within that and give yourself the best opportunity to be able to get out there as often as you can, hit the camera click more often than others, get better faster, and fast track, your career, your business, your opportunities. So I think I think hats off to you in relation to
Thank
doing that,
you.
because it is something which is, admirable. And particularly, as you say as well, in an environment where, from a female point of view, it's not that many doing it. But now there's more and more, and you probably see yourself as, maybe the, the, the the leader in relation to showing that it's possible, that others can say, okay, you know what, if she can do it, then I can do it. So yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Hats off to
thank
you in
you.
relation to it. Um,
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if I see myself as a leader, but I think I'm definitely probably the first one to have kind of given it a good whirl as a business that I know of anyway. There's a couple of people up probably north that have done it as well, but because I have a business background, um, I had different skills I brought to it. It wasn't just photography, so
mhm, mhm.
I think that's it too. And just to add to that, in 2021, my younger brother passed away, so we've had a bit of a journey in our family.
Wow. Yeah.
Um, and so I moved an hour and a half away from the reserve because my mum now lives with me, and we lost dad, and then we lost my brother, and there's only me and my mum left. So,
Wow.
and my kids. So, it was one of those occasions where sometimes you have to make a hard decision, and it was the right decision for the family.
Mhm,
And now I still have to drive an hour and a half, but it's still close. It's still easy. It's still and then I've just diversed into other areas. So as much as I work in the Mackenzie, yet again another COVID benefit, if you want to call it that, is that I now work in Fiordland, Kaikoura, the West Coast, and other places, because I'm in a bit of in the middle zone of the base of all these things. So
okay.
yeah, I'll talk a bit more about that later on as well. But I guess that whole thing of living in that area for those 2 year period is people got to know my work, and my work spoke for itself. And I think that's also crucial, and I want to talk about that later as well, in terms of if you are listening to this and you want to get out there and find a way to make your photography your life and your business and your income, it's totally doable. But there's a few key things
Mhm,
to implement that will make it so much easier and quicker.
mhm,
And I think that's something that, I'm quite passionate about as well, because I just know what it's done for me and my family and all
mhm,
the amazing places that we go to because of what I do.
mhm, mhm.
Photography full time is not for everyone either, so that's another thing. But yeah, some people would get bored of it. But and answer to your question earlier, which I haven't answered, no, I've never done weddings or any of that stuff. Portraits, it's not my jam really, to be honest. I could do it, but it's not where my passion lies.
Mhm.
The other thing I do quite a lot of in the Mackenzie is I take people on guided trips on the glacier. So we have a couple of big glaciers here that are, amazing ice caves and all sorts of cool stuff. So, we
Mhm.
really do live in an incredible country with so many uh, options. You can pretty much, choose probably from 100 different places that you could work from.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
in the Mackenzie, I've probably got 25 spots that I would take people
Nice.
to over a workshop that are real close to each other. It's a very, very diverse landscape, lots of different colours. In the Mackenzie, they talk about the layers. So it has a base layer of tussock, which is a sort of a brown or yellow dry
Mhm.
country. Then you've often got a blue lake, that beautiful aqua blue colour, which is snow fed from those glaciers. And then you've got a row of mountains, and then you've got your skies. So you've got these different colour palettes. Then you go
Yeah.
to somewhere like Fiordland, which is green and often raining, and you're probably almost a bit like Ireland in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a darker, shadowy kind of an environment, completely different, and it's the sea. So, there's lakes, there's seas, there's mountains, there's stars, there's glaciers. Like, I mean, it's a bit like going to Iceland or somewhere like that, I guess. And
Uh-huh.
I think we forget in New Zealand how lucky we are. We
Mhm.
often just, we're brought up here. And if you don't necessarily go to other places, you don't always realize.
It's on
Um,
your doorstep.
yeah, yeah. And, I just feel like my whole life is a privilege to capture it, to share it.
I would agree with you. And it's interesting you mentioned about, having so many different diversities to photograph. Um, I often think the same about Ireland. I'd say that we've got pretty much everything except for a desert. We've got forests. We don't have rainforests, but it rains a lot, so let's call it a rainforest, right? But we've everything bar a desert and glaciers for that matter. But we've got the remnants of old glaciers from the Ice Age and such like that. And it's incredible when you say, you've got 25 areas there in the Mackenzies you can bring people to, that
Yeah.
people that would probably pass by them that would live in the area and not even know that that beauty is just that little bit extra, small bit of a hike in, and all of a sudden this whole world opens. So I think having that as a playground is something, I've often thought about going to New Zealand to take photos. I mean, I've, admired a number of photographs from many different people over the years, but I would never know how to get to any of these places. So if I
Yeah.
went over and I said, you know what, I'm going to wing it on my own, I'd spend most of my time driving around like a headless chicken trying to find these areas and not find any of them without the local knowledge. And having somebody there to know those areas, it's perfect for somebody coming in or even for somebody local.
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And if you come over here, just hit me up. I'll take you to a few spots. But
Yeah,
yeah,
for
like
sure.
I think it's like everybody comes and goes to the top 12 Wanaka trees and all that, which is
Hmm.
fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But
They're
for
iconic
me,
for a
I
reason. Yeah.
just I love going off the beaten track. I love finding little nooks and crannies, as we call them over here.
Hmm.
Um, Finding places that people haven't been to. For me in my career, I've learned a lot. About the key things to teach people, because when I did guiding at the luxury lodges and stuff with the stars, I used pretty much every camera gear because I had to use the client's cameras and set them up.
Hmm.
Change all the settings for Astro, which most of them had only shot on auto before.
Yes.
Never taken an Astro shot in their life.
Hmm.
Get the odd client who's done a couple of shots, but they don't have their camera set up properly. And so, yet again, had pressure was on, propelled to learn how to do stuff quick. There was no time to muck about. And I suppose that's maybe a talent of mine, that I just trust myself that I'll figure it out. I don't know.
Yeah.
But, so I've used pretty much every camera brand out there. And I think just teaching them the basics over and over and over on repeat, and then teaching them about composition, which I think is also a really crucial
Really important.
part here
Yeah.
in this
Yeah.
country. And it is everywhere, but in this country, you can stand in one spot and get a cool picture, and then you can move to a different spot and obviously get an epic picture, and that
Yeah.
happens a lot. And you see that on workshops, and you'll know this if you're taking people places, and that you take 10 people to one location and you end up with 10 different photos. I love that about photography. I think that's
Yeah.
so cool
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
everybody puts their creative stamp of their own. It's like a fingerprint, everyone's unique, and we all
Hmm.
have our own way of doing things. And so the cool thing about that is that people then start to follow you and go, oh, I know that was one of your pictures, because you do get a vibe. You do get if you shoot enough pictures. And I think that's also one wee tip I'd say to people is, if you're not sure what to do, just keep on shooting.
Absolutely.
If you shoot 100 pictures and there's only one you like, then that's cool. Don't worry about it. There's no rules. That's the thing I think I love, because I'm a bit of a freedom seeker. There's no rules. There's no rules. Do whatever you like.
Yeah.
No one's going to tell me how I'm going to take my picture.
Yeah, absolutely. If it looks right, it is right.
And sometimes the settings you might use might not be quite textbook, but it doesn't matter if you get the result,
Yeah, yeah.
So
And
there's all
that's
that.
important. That's important, and that people can enjoy it as well,
We're
and
also
not get tied up in the technical details.
And sometimes you need those details, but we're also really lucky here that we have a lot of places close together. So, you go to some countries and you have to drive for 3 days just to get to one spot. Well, we don't really have that. So, and every spot you go to in a different region is a different flora and fauna. So, that's also really quite an important part of what we offer here in terms of, running it as a place, a tour, or a place that people can come to, and it feels like they've been to 6 different countries.
And speaking of 6 different countries, where else have you visited globally taking photos? And have you ever visited Ireland?
I have. When I was young, in my 20s, which was quite a long time ago, 25 years ago, I travelled the world when I was 23, and so that makes me 48. Yeah, so
Congratulations.
for my 49th year. um,
Trip around the
yeah,
sun,
I'm
yeah.
actually excited to be 50 next year. I don't know why. I just think it's cool. I don't care about
Me
age.
too. I'm not that
Most
far off it
people,
either, so I'm looking forward to it. Yeah.
most people think I'm in my 30s anyway, so I think it's the
I
crazy
thought so.
adventure, crazy adventuring. Yeah, so I've travelled overseas when I was 23 and went to lots of countries. And at that, I think I said earlier, I wasn't really a photographer, but I had a Minolta um, film
Film camera.
camera, pretty much mostly on auto anyway. So point and shoot. But it took really good pictures. I don't know if anyone has used a Minolta before, but they actually were really good cameras back in the day. Yeah, so haven't been far overseas as a photographer because we've been stuck here in New Zealand, but I'm really excited to go to Canada. I travelled there when I was young to Lake Louise and that whole area of Banff and all around there. I'd love to go back
Nice.
there. There's tons of places in Canada, of course, that are amazing for dark skies and sometimes auroras and things. I'd love to go to Iceland, Finland, Norway, all those cool places, obviously being an astrophotographer. I've got a bit of a passion to go to like India, maybe. Once my kids are a bit older, that'll be probably my life. I'll be off doing workshops overseas with people because people ask me that all the time. You know, would you Africa? I'd love to go there. I think the night skies are actually quite cool there. Mark G's done a bit of astrophotography there at the bush tops. Don't know if you know bush tops, but that's quite a cool place.
Okay.
Where you can go and stay in like safari tents out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So they'd be sort of my main ones at the moment. But yeah, I've always thought Greenland would be amazing. You'd have to be fit.
Yes. Greenland
um,
would be amazing, yeah, for sure.
and being a New Zealander, Antarctica and all around there and down to the Ross Sea and all those places. And yeah, so I've got a lot of work to do to be able to afford all these things. um,
But
yeah,
I'm sure, you
yeah.
know what, if you put your mind to it and you put that dartboard in front of you and aim towards that, I'm sure you'll achieve it in incremental pieces as well, which is the important part.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really blessed because I have recently a new partner, and my partner's also a photographer. So we're really
Very good.
excited about doing. He's a professional photographer for the 25 years, and his name's Andrew, and we're excited on going to do some trips together as well.
Brilliant.
So that's really exciting development as well in terms of different stuff. And he does a lot of commercial work, so he's quite different to me, but once we get to that stage in our lives, that'll be the next phase, I suppose. Who doesn't want to travel and take photos in other places?
Travel the
But,
world.
it's not lost on me that we're actually pretty blessed in New Zealand for all the locations. We also both want to go to Scotland. I reckon there'll be real good astro there. What's it like there for
Yeah, you were
astro?
competing with clouds, but there'll be a bit Astro there, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, if you just stayed in the location for a while.
Yeah, I mean, you probably got around 4 days of the year where you don't have clouds. So if you just tie it in with
Oh.
that, you'll be fine. No, I jest. I mean, in the summertime, all right, we can get, I suppose in the Irish and Scottish areas. So you do get an opportunity, all right, but they are, small windows. So the advantage that we have here is that if I look at the forecast, I can say, okay, it's going to be clear skies tonight. I can go. Chances are that it will be 50-50 chance of it being clear or not, because the Atlantic will, the winds and the jet stream will move in so quickly above us. So that's one of the challenges that you deal with there in relation to it. But yeah, I mean, I was in Scotland there in August, and I had nothing but clouds. I had no day of anyway clear skies,
Wow.
so it
Yeah.
might as well have been in Ireland, I mean, for that matter.
Yeah.
But still, at the same point, I wasn't looking for Astro, so it suited me perfectly fine because I had a lot of mood and atmosphere from the standard landscape photography. But definitely, if I was going there, it would be kind of a roulette that you'd get clear skies, let's put it that way. So you'd be spending a bit more time than whatever you expect, double that to give yourself a window,
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah, it's one of those things, the weather, isn't it? We're a bit of weather gurus here in New Zealand too, because we're in an alpine environment. Our weather changes a lot rapidly. I grew up on a farm, so we were every night. It was, Dad was on the tally, looking at the Weather Channel, and so we grew up with it. And now, being a photographer, I'm a bit obsessed with the weather as well. So,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
I think
absolutely.
that's a lot to do with success in photography as well.
Hmm.
Becoming really good at the weather patterns and understanding the places you're
How
going
to
to.
read it.
And for me, because I'm busy with my children as well, I'm always trying to map out the right place at the right time to try and be in the right spot to get the photo. That's probably always been a thing for me right from the start, because I was very time poor. And
Hmm.
I used to get FOMO because I'd see people going out for, the whole night, sitting there waiting. And I'm like, geez, I've only got 3 hours to get this shot. Like, I've got to
Yeah,
go.
yeah, 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 yeah,
um,
yeah.
yeah. And I'm still a bit like that, actually. Yeah, trying to, and the other thing is for me, because I run workshops and I love that, it's great, but I don't take a lot of pictures when I take workshops because I'm teaching.
Hmm.
So, it's really exciting to factor in a few trips that are just for fun to get my own shots.
For yourself. Yeah, absolutely,
Yeah, and then
absolutely.
the Milky Way season, you've only got obviously so many times of the year where the moon's right, so many times of the year where the weather plays ball, etc. And I guess that's the excitement of it too, isn't it?
It's a chase.
Yeah.
Yeah,
The aurora, we're quite lucky here. We have the southern aurora, the southern lights, and just even down the road from my house, I can find a spot that's semi dark enough. We just
nice.
recently had a KP7, which was pretty epic, and I think it was a 7 image stitch
Wow,
panorama of the auroras.
nice.
Yeah, and a wee bit of Milky Way on the side, and a wee bit of Jupiter there. So that was quite cool. And it was hard because it's not exactly the best composition. So, it's quite cool to challenge yourself. And I think we forget about that a lot in New Zealand, that we get a bit precious because we go, oh, yeah, we're not going to shoot in a certain place because there's light pollution.
Hmm. Hmm.
you know,
Hmm.
but
Hmm.
realistically, most people around the world are dealing with that on the daily basis. So, yeah, it's
Yeah,
good to challenge yourself to shoot in different conditions. And that's how you improve, isn't it? Yeah.
it is, and you mentioned there in relation to when you're out, you're not taking many photos yourself, and I mean, like we'll get into more about the workshops, I suppose, in the second part of the podcast. But I want to talk to something about your approach to that, which is mentoring, and I think it's something that you're very much so an advocate of. Talk to us a bit about that approach, and how do you see mentoring as being an integral part of somebody's photography journey?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I first started out, a lot of people in business told me I'd never make any money out of photography. So, it's funny how people have their opinions.
Hmm. Hmm.
And I
Hmm.
was like, well, you just wait and see. I'll show you that,
I'll
because that
show
was
you.
my
Yeah,
attitude, right?
yeah.
And so I suppose I didn't really think any more of it at the time, but because I worked in tourism and I've always been in business for myself, I knew how to run a business, and I think that's been a big part of my success and what I've done so far. And I'm only just getting started, really, but um, is that I had a formula, I had a strategy, I had a system,
Hmm.
and so then I just plugged in the pictures, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So I think what I found with that as well, and I didn't really, I guess, realize this till later on, that I believed in my ability to make it work. There was no option for it not to work. And
Okay.
I think I was brought up that way. My dad was an amazing businessman, and he taught us a lot of cool, um, personal growth strategies and things just by being who he was. He wasn't really
Hmm.
trying to, but now in this world of age of everybody's got a course to sell you,
Hmm.
um, which is cool because we're all learning and developing. But you've got to choose the right one. You've got to choose.
Okay.
You could spend years doing 50 courses of the same thing. I've done that too, to be fair. You
Hmm.
can do. You keep doing courses, but there's some point you've got to apply the knowledge. And
Yes.
so I decided during 2020, things changed significantly, that I needed to make a change if I was going to stay in business, or I had to get out of it. That I had to feed my kids, so there wasn't really an option as to wait. And so the pressure was on me, and I had to come up with an idea.
Hmm.
And that was kind of where mentoring was sort of born, I guess, because people had time to learn. I looked and made a list of all my talents and skills that I had, and that was how I created my mentoring program. To be fair, at the start, I was just like, I'm going to put this out there, and nobody may buy it, but I've got to give it a whirl. I'm probably the most unzoomed person you've ever met in your life, so I struggled with that, and I had to embrace being online and doing video chats and stuff. So that was quite a challenge for me as well. And, so I think what's awesome about the mentoring is not only have I helped people, but I'm also growing myself. And I have my own mentors as well. So, I think you never have all the knowledge. But what I've learned through doing these mentoring programs, which mostly they're one-on-one, helping people to actually get all their photography together so they can make money from it. Whether it be print sales or commercial or whatever it is they want to do, or portraits, or a lot of people do weddings and portraits and stuff, but they don't have a system, or marketing. So that's the other thing. Social media is part of that, but there's a lot of other stuff you can do, which I guess from my age and era, we started out pre-cell phone, pre-computers. We picked up the phone and dialed the circle. Talked to real people. And so I think I still lead with that, with everything I do. I'm quite blessed to have had that background plus the technology background added together. And yes, the other thing that I have realised during that time and in my life's journey, at one stage I was actually a practicing life coach. And so I think the common thread with mentoring is that people often have fear around not being good enough and all of that, which us photographers can be a bit shocking at sometimes. Addressing that, helping people understand where their talent actually sits, because a lot of times people do 5 genres of photography instead of one, or 2, and get good at that. Basically rip it all to bits and stick it back together, really. And so my job is just as a facilitator to help people, unpack who they are, what's missing, what do we need to do about that, how can we help you with that. If you're not feeling confident, what do you need? Do you need to shoot more stuff? And all of that. And then at the end of the day, what does the market actually want? Because that's also obviously quite a crucial question. Who else in your area is doing what you're doing and all of that. Not to compare, but, it's just good to figure that out and do something different. And I think that's the key point, is it doesn't mean you can't do it if there's another successful person in the area, but you just got to change it up. What's your unique selling point? All that stuff that you learn in business, that's nothing new, but you've actually got to apply it. And like anything in life, we can learn and read 1,000 books on Audible, but we're not applying it, so nothing's going to much change, except maybe some of our thoughts. But we've got to actually take action steps, and I think that we've become as a human race a little bit adverse to that. If I can be a bit blunt, I think we need to take a few more risks with our dreams and goals. What are we actually here for? Do we actually want to get to 65, 70, 80 and go, I wished I had done that, I had the opportunity, but I was too afraid? No judgment, but you know what I mean? Like, I think if we were a bit more risk adverse and able to a bit less risk adverse, able to get out there and just back ourselves a bit more and not worry about our wife or husband or daughter or son or whatever thinks about it, because this is a big part of our lives nowadays, isn't it?
Absolutely.
And then doing it for yourself. Choose yourself now and again. And this is something I've learned through my domestic abuse journey, that I was everybody's friend and the people pleaser and all of that. No wonder I went through that bloody journey. I had to learn to figure out who I was and choose myself. And that's been quite brutal. You can't go through something like that without having quite a black and white thought process about it. and then realizing that actually, the only thing we actually have is love and light, or whatever you want to call it. I know that sounds a bit esoteric, but it is what it is, and
Hmm.
we can spend our lives worrying about what everyone thinks about what we're doing, or we can actually just choose ourselves and go and do something we enjoy, and that's what I do.
And I think you're dead right, because like even if you think about like the area that we'll discuss in a moment as well, which is in workshops, right? Um, the number of people over the years that I've met that this is their first workshop that they're on, and they were nervous about going on a workshop, and at the very end of it, not only did they learn about photography, but they learned a lot about themselves, and they
Yes.
met a lot of great people and people that they'd stayed in touch with. And it's something about diving in at the deep end, feet first. It's sink or swim situation. But the reality is that you will not sink because you're going to have others there that are going to help you to stay buoyant. And even when you're looking from a business point of view, like tenacity is something I think which is really, really important. I mean, it just reminds me of the famous story with Colonel Sanders and Kentucky Fried Chicken, who went to 1,000
Yeah.
restaurants and said, "I want you to stop selling your chicken, but I want you to sell my chicken instead." And they all said no. But then finally, one person said yes. And if he gave up after 100, or gave up after 200, or 300, or 400, we wouldn't have KFC. Some people might argue,
Yeah.
okay, thankfully we may have it, but still it's the same point.
I
You
know.
know,
Yeah.
you have to back yourself. You have to say, okay, you know what, I believe in something, and come hell or high water, I'm going to continue in relation to it. But there also comes the times, it's interesting you mentioned it there through the mentoring, that you kind of have to look at what everybody's doing, tear it apart, and then rebuild it again, because somebody could be going down a completely wrong journey, banging their head off a brick wall, and not realizing that this isn't the right route. So by somebody listening on a sideline, to be able to take all that back in, to dissect it, to get rid of the rubbish, and to say, okay, this is where you should focus on. That's
Mm.
something I think which people should really, really, be open to, because having somebody to listen to your story or listen to your challenges, it's like the old phrase, a problem shared is a problem halved, right?
Yeah.
Um, Somebody can see it, and they're not emotionally attached to all the things that that person has done already. You're seeing it as a simple black and white. This is going to work, or that's not going to work. Lose that, focus on this, and this is how the route to get it. So I think, from a workshop point of view as well, and actually what we'll do is we'll take a quick break, and I'll come back and we'll pick this back up again, I suppose, in relation to how you apply that in the workshop environment. So yeah, we'll be right back
Awesome.
after this. If you're enjoying this episode of the podcast, why not jump over to iTunes or Spotify and listen to the back catalogue that we have with some great episodes where we talk about photography, gear, and some excellent guests along the way. Thanks very much for listening and for watching. We'll see you on the next one. And you're very welcome back to the Irish Photography Podcast. So, Rachel, like I would have alluded to there before the break, I think from a workshop point of view, I really want to get into more detail on how you approach workshops. So, I suppose, like you kind of alluded to it there in the first part of the show, but how long have you been a workshop leader, and what is your approach to a workshop?
Yep. Yeah. So when I first started out doing workshops, I generally went and did all the organising and set it all up and sold all the tickets and things like that. And then I'd have other photographers come and teach with me because I was
Okay.
so new. So it's always for me been about the team. And so I've been very lucky to have some really cool high-end photographers work with me, and then obviously through that process I've learned a lot from all of them as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
it's really only been the last couple of years that I've actually done more work on my own. And that was, to be fair, quite a challenge to back myself to feel that I was, at that level. So
Mm-hmm.
the great thing about that is it made me learn more new things and make sure that I had all the knowledge I wanted. Obviously always learning, but I've had some pretty amazing results with clients, and particularly women like coming out with me. And I think with astrophotography, it's a bit different than for females going out in the dark and all the rest of it. I mean, to
Yep.
be fair, out in the middle of nowhere around here, you're probably safer than in the city. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
but it's a thing. So I think that's been, I guess one of my little point of differences too, to some degree, that a lot of females feel safe with me. So that's been really cool. And yeah, just I think getting out there and focusing on those two subjects of astrophotography and landscapes, because the weather is so changeable. There has been occasions when we haven't had a huge amount of astrophotography, so it's been really good to have the landscape long exposure type backup plan. So most of
Mm-hmm.
my
Mm-hmm.
workshops that I teach on my own now are landscape, long exposure, and astrophotography as a dual
Mm-hmm.
option. Um, yeah, so because I've been out doing astro all this time and living in that, when I was living in that dark sky area, I would be up every day taking pictures in the morning, taking sunsets, sunrises, and all of that all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I actually got quite good at landscapes just as a byproduct. It wasn't my original intention. And then I got quite passionate about it. I call myself a light chaser because all my pictures are about shooting for the light and the
Mm-hmm.
highlights.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think my camera gear is particularly geared for that as well. Having an Astro setup, it works
Mm-hmm.
really well for landscapes the way I do things, which might not be
Mm-hmm.
necessarily the perfect way to do things. But I do a lot of handheld landscapes,
Okay.
and a lot of the tutors in New Zealand that teach landscapes don't do that. So I think that's also a wee bit of my point of difference is I can teach long exposure on the tripod, but I can also teach handheld, um, landscapes. And a lot of that is, and you'll know this when you're out, is just waiting for the scene
Mm-hmm.
to be the conditions that you're after and looking for. I absolutely love getting to a place where I don't need a tripod because the scene is just spectacular.
Yeah.
And that's the shot. And you'll take one or two photos and you've got it.
Yes.
And I think that's why I love the adventure side of workshops. So a lot of my workshops are adventure workshops where we'll walk somewhere. I'm not one of these tutors that just pulls up the car and gets out and takes a shot.
Mm-hmm.
I like to take people for a walk,
Mm-hmm.
or not necessarily strenuous walk, but and it's a bit of a challenge on the mindset. So sometimes I might take someone into like the Tasman Glacier, which is a flattish, slight uphill walk for 25 minutes. It's not a hard walk, but for some people, they're not used to that. It's in a
Mm-hmm.
different environment, it's in a glacial environment, um, and they're not. Sometimes people are not fit for it,
Mm-hmm.
and they do it, and they get a cool photo, and then they realize, wow, actually, I was able to achieve that. And we just take our time, and a lot of my photography workshops are actually about um, going at the pace of the slowest person, which
Okay.
is what you do when you're doing tramping and hiking.
Mm-hmm.
It's really important that the group is together. I'm very much about team, having everyone together, doing stuff together, making a plan, making itinerary. And we have an itinerary for our workshops, but they usually change based on the weather. So we get the
Yes.
whole crew together if we've got 8 or 9 people, and usually there's myself and another tutor on that occasion with that many people. We'll talk with them about what they want and what shots they want to get, and it's very much about them. What did
Mm-hmm.
they come here for? What did they invest into this for? What do they want to learn? And then there's also the post processing, obviously, as well.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think we do a pretty good job of it. I work with another lady here, Megan Maloney, who's very good at workshops as well. We quite often take people on a 4-day adventure, and that seems to be
Okay.
quite a good number.
Yeah.
3 nights, 4 days, and people get a lot of shots during that time. Sometimes if we've got a lot of great conditions, we'll just shoot the whole time, and then we'll do some online editing, processing,
Yeah.
more detail later on. So we're pretty flexible. It's always about making sure people get value for what they've invested, and it's exciting. I get excited to see them excel.
Yeah.
I teach them everything I know, which I think is also not always the way it goes on workshops.
Mm-hmm.
And I want them to be better than me. I want them to excel. I want to see them get their banger
Yeah.
of a shot. So
And you know what I mean? It's about the expectations versus reality. And I think if somebody doesn't have much of an expectation going in a workshop, or somebody has an extreme high expectation going in a workshop, then it's important that you know what they're looking for, because then they won't leave disappointed. So like, and you mentioned when I was doing my research on, it's about a fully immersive experience for your participants. And I mean, that's part of it, I imagine. Tell me a bit more about that approach.
Yeah, so usually we all stay together at one place, which is good because then they connect in with each other. And, as you said earlier, people become adventure besties where
Hmm.
they become friends and they might end up going shooting together afterwards. What happens for us as well is that because we are, I'm the same at home as I am on a workshop, as I am on a professional stage. I'm just me. So
Hmm.
they
Hmm.
get me swearing and all.
Yeah, good.
They get,
Yeah,
get me as they find me, as I am.
yeah.
Yeah. And I think that they love that because it's, we have meals together, we hang out. When we're not the kind of tutors that go, okay, well, we're done at this time, we're off. We actually
Yeah.
spend time with our people, and we have a lot of fun. We have a lot of jokes. We're in a van together a lot of the time, depending
Yeah.
on the situation. And, you get a bit of a theme going and everybody has a bit of a laugh. And
Hmm.
generally, even if somebody's not 100% comfortable with that, they generally end up opening themselves up by the end of it anyway,
Yeah.
because everybody's so genuine. I guess you attract people like yourself to some degree.
Hmm.
We've never really had any sort of tough clients necessarily that I would say was difficult, because
Hmm.
everybody, I suppose we give them an itinerary at the start where this is what we're going to be doing, so they have an understanding. And if they come and say, well, hey, I would like time with you to do X, Y, and Z, we'll give them that. So,
Hmm.
it's all about communication. It's just like being a parent, really.
Hmm. Yeah.
I quite often joke about that, me with my flask and my cup of tea, getting around like the camp mother. Everyone laughs at me because I have little goodie bags and treats and stuff, and there's
Rewards for being good. Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah.
it's just making it fun. And when you're in the middle of nowhere, there's nothing like a chocolate bar or a cup of tea out of the flask, is there? So yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah. And I think you just treat people as you'd like to be treated yourself, I guess. Yeah.
And you know what? I mean, it's about having, as you say, the full adventure. Because, like, if you're going to a place, it's not a case that it's like a 9 to 5. I mean, you're going to be
No.
shooting on social hours. You're going to be up all night. You're going to be, sleeping when other people are awake. You're going to be eating at different times. You're going to learn more from each other. And you'll learn also from the participants too, I think, which is an
Yes.
important part. If you're open to, meeting with other people. And I've noticed that even on people that I've met over the years, that I learn from others as well, and I go, geez, I never thought of that. Or
Yes.
even as you say, you could bring 10 people to one area, they all get 10 different images. Yeah, but you know what, one other person has their camera 6 inches lower or 6 inches to the left, and it completely changes the image because it's a far better balanced image, and the composition really comes into it then. And I think
Yes.
that's where you know you leave with the images, but your memories are more of the people and the experiences that you've had along the way. The images are something that you can look at and go, I remember that day, it was absolutely Baltic, or my feet were sore, or we had
Yeah.
such a laugh that morning at breakfast, or whatever it might be. So,
Yeah.
like, the images are one thing I think which, it brings back all those different memories. And something I want to kind of touch on, and you mentioned it there a second ago, is, post processing. Because somebody who starts out, taking an image, and as you say, most people have the camera on automatic, and then they discovered the A, and I've joked with this before, is A for awesome, and like P is for professional, and M is for masterclass, or oh my god, no, that's far too complicated.
Yeah.
When you start getting the image, or most people again would shoot in JPEG and they wouldn't shoot in RAW, and they're trying to say,
Yes.
okay, why should I shoot in RAW? So, like, talk to me a bit about the approach in post processing. Because I know when I first started out in post processing, I was like, oh wow, look at these sliders, look what that can do. Oh wow, and it only goes to 10. I want it to go to 11. I mean,
Yes.
it's not about that. It's about subtleties I've learned over the years. Like, but talk to me a bit about your approach in post processing in the field and how you help people there.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's exciting and funny you say all of that, because it's exactly what I talk about. And I guess everybody has their own way of doing things in their own style, and that's absolutely fine. Um, I personally love a picture that's been shot well in camera and then it's edited as natural as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just me. With Astro, probably there's a wee bit more pushing of the slider here and there, depending on what you're doing. But
Mm-hmm.
even then, most of my Astro shots are single images. I don't stack. It's not my jam, but I teach people to stack if they want, but it's not what I do. And I guess
Mm-hmm.
having my Canon set up, I don't really need to. So, um, I don't do composites, but I can teach people how to do it if they want. So I spend quite a bit of time when I first get to know people asking them questions, so I get an understanding of what they're looking for, what they're wanting to learn, what type of shots they want to shoot. We actually do a survey before the workshop, asking them a whole bunch of questions about what gear they've got, what do they want to learn, what level do they feel they're at with their post-processing and that. And so, when they come, we already have a bit of an understanding about that. But it depends on what you use. Like I use Lightroom mostly. I do a wee bit of Photoshop here and there, but I'm not big on Photoshop. A lot of people here use Capture One. Just depends on what people are into, I guess. But for me, I think it depends also on your camera gear. So, if you're shooting a DSLR versus the latest mirrorless, different editing again sometimes, and different settings when you're shooting. That's actually something quite interesting as well, and you can learn a lot from each other. And as you said before, I had a guy recently on a workshop who was really exceptional at one particular area, and he had a completely different camera setup and a Fujifilm, which I haven't shot on before. And other people asking questions, and I just said, what, would you mind, Jared, explaining that? Would you be happy to share your knowledge, because he's amazing and he loved it. And that's what I love about workshops, is that you actually can get all of that information from each other. And we had another guy on that same event who was from the Photography Society, incredible businessman, different conversation about business and how to do things, and everybody's learning. And I think it's just so cool when you get that knowledge. So post-processing, we do probably 2 or 3 sessions depending on how much shooting we're doing throughout our workshops. So we'll do one on Astro, one on landscapes, basically starting, because most of our clients are beginners or intermediates there, starting with all the basics and editing, show them a couple of edits. This is what we do. Here's a raw file. This is what we're doing with it. So we'll do that. And then the third session is a bit more of them getting their images out, actually doing some editing, and while we're sitting there, kind of thing. My big sort of, I guess, bugbear thing that I wish people would not do so much is use the saturation slider. You know what I mean. But I think what I've discovered is, and you'll know this, is that a lot of people don't have the right calibrated screen. So that is actually something that we teach a lot about. Because they think they're doing a good job on their editing, and then they don't realise that the computer is actually not calibrated. And then we often will let them hook it up to us. We take a screen with us, hook it up to our screen, and then they go, "Oh my goodness! Like, wow, that's actually incredible difference in colour." Also, every phone that we have these days has a different colour. iPhones versus Samsungs, for example, totally different colours. And I quite often do this with my partner, because he's an iPhone and I'm a Samsung, and I'll go, "Oh, can I have a look at that picture I just shared on your phone?" And it just looks so different, So I think this is part of the big challenge with this, is that if you know it's right on your calibrated screen, that's what you go with. Also not that easy sometimes. So we teach them all that. I do a lot of printing and sell a lot of prints and canvases, so I teach them a bit about that as well. How to edit to print, which is also different again. And you might need to put a bit more saturation or a bit more contrast or whatever it is you're using to print it. I always talk to them about, when they're first new to it, doing 10 pictures they love, printing them out as 6x4s on the right paper with the right inks, so you can get an idea of what they look like before you start printing out a big 1.5 meter image, and then you realize it's not what you love. We teach mostly to shoot the best image in camera as possible, obviously, and less is more with the editing. If they want to do stacking and all of that sort of stuff, then we'll teach them how to do that as well. But I don't know, you could spend 3 hours editing one image, or 3 minutes, right? I think for me, I'm busy, I haven't got time for that. I do appreciate when someone does spend 3 hours on editing an image, when I see it afterwards and go, wow, that's art. A lot of the time they might have done it as a composite, and they've shot different foreground and all the rest of it. I love that to see and look at, and I can teach it, but it's not what I shoot myself. Yeah, so I guess there's a free license really with all of that. I did a bit of graphic design before I was a photographer, so I had a good understanding of color. I also feel like people use the yellow slider a lot more, the tone a lot more than they possibly realize sometimes, and it comes out, obviously looking a fake orange. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd probably be more recommending people to use their tone curve and small adjustments on highlights and lights and things like that, rather than whipping up those main basic tab
Yeah.
sliders.
They're not designed to go to 11. That's the
No,
big thing.
no, no. So I
Let,
don't know if
let
that
less.
answers your question, but
No,
yeah,
it does. Yeah, it does.
I also really have in my mind is use the clipping tools at the top of the histogram as well. Obviously, is
Yeah.
helpful, but a lot of people don't know that when you print something out, if it's if your clipping's out of whack, then it doesn't print any color. So just having all those little things in mind and using your brush if you need to. If you've got a small shaded area that's over the clipping, then brush that down a bit with a bit of shadow reduction or blacks or whatever. Just small as I use a lot of masking if I'm going to do something that's got layers of color and light. I'll put in my radial filter on a certain area, and I'll use my brush or whatever, and I'll just spend. I could sometimes on an image that I love, I might spend 10 minutes just doing that and selected areas of light. And I think that's probably just the wee extras that makes a difference. Also crucial to check if you've got any lens spots and that kind of thing, because you can have this incredible image printed out and there's like 3 big fat lens spots on it. So
yeah.
yeah,
And unfortunately, particularly if you shoot Sony, you have that issue quite a lot because
and if you're using Photoshop, I use content aware a lot to take out a fence post or a cloud that's over the corner of the image. So another thing is, your on your actual 4 corners, you want to make sure there's if you can, no random piece of cloud coming in there that's half a cloud. Get rid of it. Just so that you've got same as down the bottom corner. If you've got like a little branch or a twig coming in that doesn't really mean anything, get rid of it. Just because people's eye then is drawn to the middle of the image or wherever it is, the subject, rather than some random thing on the corner. So I think that leading line is obviously really important. If you've got a landscape with a leading line, obviously you're going to get a lot more emotive attachment from people. If you're sharing stuff on social media, it's really hard sometimes because I do a lot of big stitch panoramas. So I might have 55 images stitched together, but on social media it looks nothing because it's so tiny. Whereas on my big screen it looks incredible and I'm like, oh, I love that picture, So I think that's really hard. Sometimes you've got to choose what you put online for those types of reasons, or maybe chop them into sections and then post them as a panorama thing. That's another whole conversation really, but I think sometimes we shoot with a wide angle lens and things get lost sometimes. So always wise to consider shooting 2 shots. So still do your wide shot. If you're going to do that as a print and a canvas on a wall, it would be amazing. But on social media, it's not going to look amazing. So you might want to also zoom into, a 200mm shot as well, to get the actual context of the actual subject that you're shooting, and maybe post them together along those lines. I don't know. I mean, everyone's different, but I do also shoot a bit of kitchen splashbacks and stuff like that, which I'll zoom in and shoot a big grid, stitch them all together. I use back button focus quite a lot, which seems to be a dying art these days, actually. Not many people use it, but I love that, and I'll shoot a lot of my I guess because I'm DSLR as well. I do have a EOS R, which I've just got, but a lot of my stuff's been shot on the 6D, and so I use a lot of things switched off. I like manual. I like everything manual. I like to do it myself, whereas a lot of people like to rely on the camera. They might shoot TV or they might shoot aperture priority, and that's fine, but I never do that. So I think the more you shoot on manual and force yourself, that's how you learn everything. And
I
it's those times when you shoot a bunch of stuff thinking it's good and you get home and it's shit. You go,
yes.
oh, what? Damn it. You know?
And you know what, right? It's interesting you say there because you mentioned earlier on about social media, and I think that's an important one as well, just to kind of touch on because people can get hung up on posting an image on social media and how the image is going to be perceived on social
Yeah.
media. I mean,
Yeah.
I've seen it so many times over the years, and we've made a number of podcasts about it as well. Social media is a great tool. It's free. Don't complain about it, but don't also
Yeah.
hang your coat on it and rely on it for what
Yeah.
it's going to be because social media companies they're doing something which is they're playing on an emotion that people are looking for those likes, and it's looking for the emotional connection and the gratification of, oh, this image gets 20 likes or this image gets 200 likes. It
Yeah.
doesn't necessarily mean that it's a better image as far as you're concerned. It just may be more appealing to the audience, and if the audience sees what you saw and why you took the image, then great. But if they don't, it makes no difference. You still like the image, you still posted the image. So I think
Yeah.
social media is something that can be a really good help, but also can be a curse because people can get so tied up in it. And yeah, I could go on about that for hours. But I mean, look,
Yeah.
you mentioned that you wanted to kind of touch upon social media. So yeah, what's your thoughts yourself?
Well, I've always felt like social media is a software program. So it's a really
Yeah,
interesting statement that because if you feel like social media is an emotional place, which is what a lot of people use it for, you'll come unstuck because
yeah,
you'll get upset about something at some stage.
yeah,
Whereas if you think of it that it's a software program and you choose to put things on it to share them with whoever,
yeah.
um, it's a different way of thinking about what you post. Also, because I'm big on this with my children, every single thing you post is there forever. So,
Mm-hmm.
so I think what as a photographer, what's important is people do this thing where they post 12 pictures of the same thing, all together in one post. And I'm like, oh God,
Mm-hmm.
I have to actually search through all of that and find one that I like. So I don't bother. So I
Mm-hmm.
think that's number one on Facebook. I see that all the time where people will share a whole bunch of stuff in the same place. So just choose one banger, the best picture that you love. Doesn't matter whether other people like it or not. It's you're doing it. This is what I started out with when I started. If I like it, you'll see it. If I don't like it, you'll never see it. I don't
Mm-hmm.
care about all those other things that people post for because my intuition and my heart is with the picture, if that makes sense. And I
Yeah.
believe that energy of that will attract the people who actually love your work. So if you use it as a tool and as a platform, a software program where you share your heart, if you want to call it that, and
Mm-hmm.
your best work, then you'll just automatically attract those right people eventually. It might take a
Mm-hmm.
while. It takes about 2 years now to actually even build a social media channel. It's not like it used to be.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
you just got to keep on posting because you like it. And I'm the same with that with any photos. Shoot it because you like it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not shooting it for anyone else unless you're doing a commercial job and you've got a brief. Then
Mm-hmm.
do it for yourself. And I think, unfortunately, we kind of are in this world where social media owns people a wee bit and they think that you're their person or you're their photographer or whatever, and that can be a trap that people get stuck into, I think. And there's all these competitions everywhere. You'll see this all the time, this award, that award, this award. That's great and it's cool to participate in it, but the chances of actually winning anything like that are very slim for most people, even if
Mm-hmm.
you're an amazing photographer. So don't get caught up in that either, because I see this all the time now. There are so many photography award competitions these days, which are actually for the person running them often a business
Mm-hmm.
where they're making a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. But don't feel like that defines you as a photographer, because it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
I could enter every single competition and I'll never win because I don't do a composite. I don't use a tracker. I don't have stacked images, ruddy rah. I don't really care what people think about that
Mm-hmm.
because I shoot what I choose, how I want to do it for my own reasons. And I think that's really important with social media. and just choose your best work to showcase. So that would be my other thing. People post something because they feel they have to post something, but it's mediocre.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes all their really good images not
Diluted.
as, yeah. So,
Yeah.
if you go, oh, okay, I went out on this trip and I told everybody I was going and it was amazing and I'm not real happy with my pictures, don't post it.
Mm-hmm.
You've got no obligation to post that. I've done that a few times this year actually, because I kind of lost my mojo a wee bit over the beginning of this year was the hardest for me,
Okay.
mentally and in business, um, since COVID, because everybody forgot about you. That 2020, 2021, everybody was all over each other and we'll
Yeah.
support you and da da. And that was awesome, and everyone's in the same bus. 2022, no one gives a shit. Everyone's trying to survive and
Mm-hmm.
figure out their thing, and that's fine. But I just didn't even get my camera out hardly for the first 4 months of the year. Um, and I was like, actually, you know what? It's okay if I don't post this week.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that taught me a lot about myself and about how I use my socials and my algorithms and my what do you call it, my statistics are just the same as they were before. And who cares anyway?
Mm-hmm.
Because at the end of the day, so long as I'm okay and I'm working on myself, which I've done a lot this year actually, done a lot of work on myself about what do I want to be doing for the next 10 years and how is it going to work and what do I have to do to achieve that. And if social media disappeared tomorrow, which this is another interesting thing, a real good mate of mine had an amazing social media channel, 20 something thousand followers, awesome guy, never did anything wrong.
Mm-hmm.
His the channel got deleted overnight, gone. That's happened to a
Gone.
few photographers now. You can't rely on that. You
You
can't
can't.
have that as your reliance. So I'm a big stickler about having people's email address. That's my old school
Yeah.
marketing brain, I guess. Different
Yeah.
ways to communicate with people. Even I'm not very good at doing a newsletter, but I'm trying to get better at that myself. But just having the old newsletter or having multiple channels to post stuff on. So if one disappears, then
You've
they're
got
all
something
just
else.
tools, all
Yeah.
just tools, all just stuff to use. And as you say, grateful for it because it's free generally. I do a bit of boosted Facebook ads sometimes, but I haven't done that this year. But sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. But you can't rely on it.
You can't,
Yeah,
and you say there, and it's interesting. You mentioned that it's a software program. Absolutely, I'd 100% agree with you. And you've touched on something else as well, I think, which is really, really important. People spend so much time, years, in fact, building up a social media following, which
yeah,
is not in their control. It's in the
yeah,
control of somebody else. With
yeah,
the algorithm. Yeah, we may joke and say, oh, I don't care about the algorithm, but the algorithm doesn't care about you either. And the
yeah,
algorithm, you can do a lot of work, and I've seen it over the years, and even more so in 2022, where people, like with Instagram as an example, the big exodus from Instagram, because people with 50,000 followers are getting 100 likes on an image, and that means that nobody is seeing the image because Instagram is choosing not to show them. By having
mm,
somebody on your own database, your own email newsletter, or whatever you might call it, uh, they're people who want to hear from you. They're people who've given you their email address because they like what you've got to say. They like to see what you got to share and such like that. And
yeah,
recently, I don't know if you're on it or not yet, but you've got this migration away from Instagram and over to Vero.
yeah,
And Vero is something which I'm on, and I like it because it's actually good, because people that I like, I get to see their images. I don't see a crap load of stupid ads for stuff, which is just annoying me, that I see on
yeah,
Instagram. Whereas if I look on Vero, I'm looking at images and I'm not getting distracted, and I can actually immerse myself in photography when I'm looking at that app. And that's where, I look and then kind of go, oh, wow, okay, I didn't know that this place existed, or I didn't know about this shot. And you go and you discover more people who are photographers. You're not discovering brands that are paying Instagram, for argument's sake, to be showing you something which you've no interest in whatsoever, but for some reason this algorithm has thought that you've an interest in, I don't know, memory foam socks for your big toe. Okay,
yeah, yeah,
I've never spoke to anybody about my big toe. Why am I seeing something about my big toe? I don't know, and that just annoys the hell out of me. You know what I mean? So I think photography in its its form, you're absolutely right. Old school is still the right way. Social media is there, yes, but you still have to have your contact and the people for having their contact with you. Because I've even noticed it myself. Some people have gone, geez, Darren, I haven't seen you post in a while. I goes, what? I'm posting all the time. I haven't seen any of your images. And then all
Yeah.
of a sudden I'm going, okay, well, how do I now get them to be able to see what I've been posting? Because they've got a clear interest in what I've been posting. So
Yeah.
you've no control over social media whatsoever. And if anybody thinks that they have, it can be gone overnight. It can either be hacked. And I did a podcast in relation to a big thing that was happening a number of months back on Instagram and how easy people's accounts were being hacked. You couldn't get it back. So you could spend
Yeah.
years building something up. And
Yeah,
then
exactly.
it's
And,
gone.
you know, there's a couple of good examples at the moment. I'm on Vero as well, but to be fair, I haven't spent much time there yet, but I need to get some more posts on there. But I don't know. It's interesting. Like, I'm a big believer in consistency, right? So I've been on social media a long time since it started, and with my business. And, you know, I'm a big believer in consistency. So when everyone did a mass exodus from Instagram, I just kept doing my usual thing. And I'm getting quite good results on there. And I don't know if that's been to my advantage, to be fair, because I've got like, I don't know, I've only got like 2,700 followers or something. But they're people that know me. They're people that have met me, know me, seen me, heard me talk on a podcast, whatever. You know, they're real followers, I call them.
Yeah.
I don't have thousands, but I have good engagement. So my engagement the other day was 46,000 accounts, and I've got 2,700 followers. And it's quite consistently like that. Anyway, who knows? But the other thing that's happening now is the mass exodus to Twitter for the NFTs and all of that, which is fine. But now look what's happening to Twitter. So, you know, I've seen people I know spend their whole life for the last 2 years on Twitter. And that's been an investment they've made, and that's cool. But what's going to happen to it now? Nobody knows. But, you know, I think if you just keep on being consistent on all the platforms, and even Facebook to some degree, a lot of people don't even do Facebook anymore. A lot of my clients are not on Facebook, actually, which is interesting. But I'll still keep posting there. And I think the benefit of Facebook at the moment, I don't even think Facebook will be around in a few years, but for this. But the benefit to Facebook is the groups. And I've met some amazing people through groups. You know, you see other people's stuff, you might learn something that you didn't know, etc. You know, and I think that in New Zealand, because we're a small community, we actually have some really cool groups where a lot of people that you know, or you might not have met them in real life, but you follow them and you know they live in a certain location, and then when you go there, you might meet up and have a coffee. And so I think that kind of thing is that networking is really powerful. Yeah, so I don't know, like it's a big thing. I think at the end of the day, we're actually starting to go back to the old website or start your own app or whatever. I think, you know, at the moment, people are loving podcasts because it's an easy way to multitask when you're doing something else. I don't really think that's probably going to change that much. At the end of the day, people want to connect with other people in some shape or form. And so as a business owner and as a smart business owner, post on all the platforms because people that are into whatever they're into, you know, if people only do Instagram, that's where they'll find you. If people only do Facebook, which a lot of my demographic is probably mums on Facebook to some degree, to be fair. But, you know, a lot of my hiring luxury clients, they don't do social media. So you have to have their email address to communicate, you know. So it's all quite a lot of work, isn't it? And I guess that's the thing. If you haven't got the passion for it, you will just go, ugh, can't be bothered. I see photographers all the time who are real exceptional photographers, but they can't be bothered putting in the effort for marketing. And I've said this to a guy I know, you're so good at what you do. You could be doing X, Y, and Z and you'd be getting, you know, other clients because of it. And he's like, I can't be bothered. You know, and I get that too because we're all busy. But at the end of the day, there's no one right way to do anything. And I think at the end of the day, if you do what you do and you own it, like I kind of own my Instagram feed and I send all my clients there. I just tell people, if you want to see my work, just go to Instagram because that's where it is. And I just always use that because I find it's quite a good visual grid.
Absolutely. Absolutely, and
Yeah.
it's good to have it in that way too, because if you own it and you say, okay, this is what I'm going to use it for my benefit, as opposed to it becoming an
It's
owner of
just a
you.
big brochure, mate. It's just a big
Yeah,
brochure, isn't it? Yeah.
absolutely.
That's
Yeah,
how I think about it. And, it doesn't matter who follows me and who doesn't. Or I've got some quite interesting people that follow my work, and I just go, oh, yeah, cool. Righto. Like, it doesn't
yeah,
matter.
yeah. Just move on. Yeah,
you
exactly.
know, you know.
And actually, speaking of moving on, let's go away from the
Yes.
social media side of things, right? So tell me, have you? We've mentioned about some of your shots you've taken in Astro point of view. You've got a great backyard and such like that. We've mentioned about going global, and you haven't gone there with a camera. Have you got a bucket shot in mind that you want to get for yourself that you haven't gotten yet, and are you planning it over your next 10 years? Is it something that's going to wait until the kids are grown up that you want to go get it, or is there a shot that you said, I definitely want to have that in my portfolio?
Yeah, it's a great question. There's quite a few on that list, I think. Obviously overseas, Iceland and
Hmm.
all the shots you see over there. There's the places, but here in New Zealand, and it's a funny little shot, but it's one that plagues me. There's a place called the Meraki Boulders. It's at the sea. There's these big egg boulders. They're big round boulders that are in a row that have come up over thousands of years, and
Hmm.
they're on the beach, and a lot of people go there for tourism and things, and the sea comes in there, and the Milky Way's rising in
Nice.
there. There's a little bit of light pollution here and there. You can also see the aurora from there, and it's quite challenging because you've got to make sure you're there on the right day with a clear sky, with the tide in the right place. Because if the
Hmm.
tide's too far in, it doesn't work.
Hmm.
Um, Generally your tripod will move because the tide comes in over it at some point, so it's a really
Yeah,
challenging
it's
shot.
a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. So I tried to get it this year and miserably failed, actually. So yeah, it was one of those ones where you're just like, damn. So I've got to go. And the other thing about that place is it gets really foggy. So you might have this ultimate forecast. You drive all the way there. It's like about 3 hour drive or something. And the forecast is for a beautiful clear sky, but it's foggy and it doesn't go away at all. So
Mm, mm.
yeah, so that would be probably my one Astro shot that I've been trying to get for a long time. I also had this year big plans to do a lot of Astro panoramas. The weather just hasn't been favourable at the right time.
Hmm.
It's just been one of those winters. We've had so much snow, so much rain. Just hasn't worked out how I wanted it to, and I wasn't able to be there on the right day and all of that. So I really do struggle with that sometimes because I've got these goals and things I want to tick off for the season,
Absolutely. Yeah.
and it just doesn't happen. And then my kids got sick, and everyone had COVID and rah rah, and it was like, God.
But you know what? Isn't it good to have that in your visualization that you say, okay, I want that. I know I can
Yeah,
get it. It's not going to go anywhere. You just got to wait for the right conditions, the right timing to allow you to be able to get there. And
yeah,
I and I think it's important as well to have that because it gives you something to strive for. It gives you something, as I said, stick it on the dartboard, say, okay, that will be mine.
yeah.
I will get that.
Absolutely. And I think what I'm learning too is like, because we're obviously our weather's very different to yours in terms of we're at two opposite ends of the
Yeah.
of the world. But
Yeah.
it's learning how to also navigate if I went to those other places, what would I be needing to look for or learn about? We have a cold wind come through. We call it a southerly. You probably call it a northerly. I don't know what you do, but
Northern. Yeah.
like it's
Yeah.
completely different, opposite thinking. And where's the Milky Way going to be sitting, and how much above the horizon is it going to be, and all that. So I do use photo pills a wee bit, but I like to learn a lot of this stuff with my own brain, and I think that's something that I did right from the start,
Hmm. Hmm.
as I learned how to do a lot of things without the apps. For the first year that I did astrophotography, a mate of mine, Jordan, said, "Don't use any of the apps. Just do it with your own brain, and learn where the Milky Way is every month, and
Hmm.
where it's rising and all the rest of it." And I did that because I thought it was a good idea. And a lot of people don't even ever know where it's going to be rising. I find that
Hmm.
fascinating,
Hmm.
because they've always used an app. So
Yeah.
that's one wee thing I teach people is go a whole season without using the app. Use your own mind, And then when you're out and about, you'll find compositions, and you'll get cool foregrounds and go, oh, in April next year this would be a cool spot for that.
Yeah, always be scouting.
Yeah. So I like
Yeah.
the challenge of that. Yeah.
I have a question now for you, right? It's a relatively new question I've introduced into the podcast, but I want to ask it to every single guest, and I'm excited to hear your thoughts in relation to it as well. From obviously, with your view from an Astro point of view, and also from the landscape point of view. And it's a question that: is it the photographer that creates the image, or is it the scene that presents itself?
I was a bit stumped on this one. He showed, is this a trick question? Yeah, I don't know. There's 50 answers to it. Yeah, I think a lot of it is the photographer. I guess your vision, your passion, the way you think about it. Yeah, all the gear you're going to use, etc. Because obviously that can have an impact as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think I'll say the photographer.
Okay, no, and there's
It's
no
a
right
bit
or
of
wrong answer.
both.
Right? It
Yeah.
is a bit of both, and that's what I've generally had in the answers that people have given me.
Yeah,
And
being in the right place at the right time sometimes, isn't
precisely
it? Yeah.
And that's exactly the reason I asked that question, because you could go for months and months and months trying to plan that bucket shot, and
Yeah.
I could just rock up, and I go, oh, look at that, click, and I
I
get the
know.
shot, and
Happens
that's
all
where
the
I think
time.
and that's the dichotomy of that question, because it is a case that I could have all the gear and no idea, or I could have the minimal amount of gear, but I'm just so lucky that I'm there right at the right time when the scene is presented itself and I get the same shot. Maybe
Yeah.
I get the same shot, maybe I don't get the same shot, but I get a shot that I'm happy with. So that's why I asked that question, I think. And your
Yeah,
answer is,
absolutely.
there's no right or wrong answer. I was, like I say, I was intrigued to hear your thoughts in relation to it. And I
That's
would
actually
agree with you.
happened. That's actually happened to me on that same bucket list place. Actually, this guy was there. He'd just come here from the UK, and he just asked if he could stand with us, me and my mate. And I was like, yeah, sure, go for it. And we're just having a yarn. Anyway, he got the shot and I didn't. And I'm like, damn it. Just where
There
he
you
was
go.
standing, right? Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Case in point.
Yeah.
All right. So look, we're going to take one final break, and I'll be right back. I've got 3 staple questions I ask every guest, and I'm really looking forward now to hearing your answers. So I'll be right back
Awesome.
after this. If you're enjoying this episode of the podcast, why not jump over to iTunes or Spotify and listen to the back catalogue that we have of some great episodes where we talk about photography, gear, and some excellent guests along the way. Thanks very much for listening and for watching. We'll see you on the next one. And you're very welcome back to the final part of this week's episode of the Irish Photography Podcast. So, Rachel, like I said there from the previous break, I have 3 questions, and I'm looking forward now to hearing your answers to these staple 3 questions of the podcast. First one is, and everybody has one, what's yours? A funny photography story.
Oh well, my funny photography story is keeping it real. We've all got our stories, but recently, probably the latest one, I was at a photography conference in New Zealand, and I met a really cool dude called Paul Holan. He's an amazing award-winning aerial photographer in Australia. He's actually Kiwi originally, but he lives in Tasmania. And he ended up getting a ride to the airport with me after the conference, and there was myself, my partner Andrew, and my best friend Stace, and Paul and I, and we were driving down the coast, and we got this phone call from the heli pilot at the Kaikoura airport saying that there was a southern right whale and baby calf in the bay. Where were we? Would we be keen to jump on the heli and get a couple of shots? And this was to my partner Andrew, and he goes, "Oh, I've actually got 3 other photographers with me." He's like, "Yeah, sweet, drive straight here now." So we drove to the airport, in a hurry. Time was at the minimum, and Andrew's like, "Oh, you should shoot on the R6. I'll give you a go on my R6." Righto, okay, it's all set up, ready to go. Righto, this is completely against all my rules of shooting with someone else's camera gear.
Uh-huh.
Get in the heli, snapping away, taking all these amazing pictures, and doors off, had the door open, everything. It was absolutely incredible. This beautiful whale that was quite a rare thing to see. And get back to the house, everyone's downloading all their pictures and wanting to see who's got the best photo. Jesus, just about every single photo of mine was out of focus. I was so gutted. I was so upset about it. I actually threw my toys out of the cot. They were laughing at me. And I was like, this is exactly why I don't use other people's cameras.
Oh, no.
Anyway, I found this one photo that was in focus, and it was a really good photo. This one shot
Okay.
out of all the photos. And what had happened is that my nose had tipped onto the focal point on the screen, and it had gone
Okay.
like right up to the top right hand corner of the focus instead of in the in the middle.
Yeah, in the center, yeah.
But I didn't realise, because I'd never used it before, that was a thing. You stick with the old manual. Anyway, so then it became a hilarious conversation about all the times that people had done a big job and how they hadn't had a card in the camera, or did this full heli job. We're out in the middle of nowhere, and got back and realised I used someone else's camera, that there was no card in the camera, rah-de-rah. So it just became a laugh in the end, but I was really upset about it. Anyway, I shared this one picture on the socials, and it ended up getting picked up by Canon, so it was hilarious. The whole thing was just so funny. I was just like, oh, you only need one good picture.
You only need one good picture. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And as you say,
it's the fluky one.
I know, right? And as you say, Canon for life. So
yeah, absolutely.
It was
And
lucky.
that's the next question, actually, which is, what gear do you shoot with? So we know it's Canon, and you've alluded to it anyway in the type of body that you shoot at the moment, and you've just gotten the EOS R. So tell us what's in your Canon bag.
Yep. So because I've done a lot of Astro, I've got two 6D Mark 1s, because when I take clients out, they'd often need a camera. So I had two of those. I have had a 5D Mark 4 previously, which I've just recently sold because I don't need it. And at the moment, I'm just started on a EOS R, which should be quite good for Astro.
Great camera.
So I haven't actually given it a good whirl at that yet, but bigger goals to get an R5 at some point. I'm actually going to be doing some Astro workshops for Canon next year, so that's pretty cool. And another genre. And yeah, so I'm looking towards probably going to the R5 at some stage. But yeah, I'm not big on gear. I mean, I love my Canon gear. I'm a bit like you, a Canon for life. I don't see myself changing after looking at all the other camera gear that my clients have used and stuff. I love how it works and what it does, and I love the color.
The buttons are.
Yeah, I love the color. I can operate my 6D fully in the dark without a torch at any time. So I love all that practicality of it. And I don't think I'll ever sell those cameras. I think there's something that I'll always keep. One thing that's happening at the moment, which is really exciting for me, is all my children want to learn photography. So all of a sudden we've come up with this project that we're doing together, and I've just bought a couple of cheap wee Canon DSLRs for them to start on. And one of them wants to do some filming and video, so I've actually just got her a wee Olympus travel camera because I had one before, and it's really good for that. And keeping in mind for them that at the moment they just want something small they can chuck in their backpack rather than a big set of gear. But I'll probably keep those 6Ds for them eventually if they want to do something with it. And we've got this bit of a travel project that we're doing to the North Island, and we'll get them into it. And obviously having all the same lenses and stuff, it makes sense to
much easier.
Stick with that. But I think the other thing for me with staying with DSLR as well, and I guess eventually I'll have to change, but I just love how it shoots. I don't want AI. I don't want anyone telling me how to do things. I like everything manual.
Well,
so my partner thinks I'm a dinosaur. He's like, get with the program. We don't do that anymore. I'm like, well, I do.
Well, you know what? I shoot with an EOS R and I shoot manual. And the one thing that has been a game changer for me is the focus peaking.
Yeah.
And it really, really does change the outlook in relation to the image. You keep every single aspect of Canon that you'd have. I have a 60 and I have an EOS R. I still have my 60 originally from it. I haven't used my 60 since I've gotten the EOS R, but like that, I don't want to get rid of my 60 because I say, okay, it means so much to me. I've gone through a lot with it. And like, you probably will end up having to go down the route of
I
mirrorless because
will.
Canon will stop making the DSLRs. I
Yeah.
mean, they've already said they're going to go with the RF mount lenses, and that's what they're building going
Yeah.
forward. The EF mounts are going to be obsolete, but yeah, Canon for life. Good on you for the Canon side
Exactly.
of
And yeah, I
things.
guess
Yeah.
you've brought up a point there that I have been through a lot with that camera, so probably there is a bit of attachment to it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, and then the third question is our VSP. So it stands for a very solid product. It's a product you won't leave home without, and you put your name to it if you could. Doesn't have to be camera gear. It could be anything at all. What will you always have in your bag, and what would you swear by?
Yeah. Oh, it would have to be my Kathmandu adventure boots,
Very
because
good.
that gets me where I want to be. And I'm a big believer in footwear and boots being really important, especially with Astro. I never get cold feet because I've
Hmm.
got the right boots. So that would
Yeah.
be my, yeah.
Very good, very very good choice as well. And I think it's something that people they spend an absolute fortune on the camera gear, and then they stand there uncomfortable wanting to go home, or
Yeah.
get blisters on their feet or get wet feet or whatever. I mean, I've got a pair of boots which have been generally quite good, but in my last trip that I was in the north of Ireland, I got absolutely drenched, but I got drenched from the top down. So I didn't get drenched in puddles of water. I just got so soaked that it came down through my trousers and then into the boots from the top.
Wow.
That's how wet I got. So yeah, I
That's
mean,
wet.
yeah, that's wet. Okay, great product. So look, yeah, only final two questions actually for you, Rachel, is what's next for you, and where can people find more information on you?
Yep. Awesome. What's next for me is actually a lot more personal shooting. I've been having this bit of a talk to myself about what's next, and
Hmm.
I feel like I've kind of dropped my ball a wee bit on my own personal shooting last 2 or 3 years. So I've got some projects that I want to shoot. I've got a DJI drone that I've got a project that I want to do on that as well, which is an aerial photography passion project. I've done a bit of work with the what's called the Kaimanawa wild horses here in New Zealand. We have a wild horses band here that is protected, and I've done 2 or 3 shoots with them before, but I want to add to my library
Very good.
of that, and it's a bit of a community project, I suppose, as well. But I love
Hmm.
horses, so I grew up on horses, so that's something I want to do. I've got a coffee table book in production at the moment, which nobody really knows about, so I'm really excited about that. I've actually,
Exclusive. There you go. Yeah.
yeah, I've been commissioned to do it, and by another company, which is really exciting. And you
Brilliant.
kind of feel like when you get to that stage that you've actually got some good pictures if people
Hmm.
ask you to do something like that. I've been really slack on my print website, so that's a big project for me to get that properly up and running, because I do sell quite a lot of prints and stuff. And I really want to just hone in on what would be if I bucket list projects that I would love to do this year, and maybe just make some wee steps towards those. So probably do a bit more commercial work, because I think I miss out on a lot of work because I'm not doing that. So that
Hmm.
might be something I will add to my box this year. And overseas workshop probably for 2025,
Very good.
26.
Very
So
good.
just planning out some different things, and yeah, just looking into maybe just redefining a few of my own personal projects. Yeah.
You're not going to sit still, so are you?
No, sleep when I'm dead, mate. Oh, I just love it. I love it. I don't know. Every
Absolutely.
single day is a great day. Like I'm
Absolutely.
so blessed to be doing this for my life. And it took me. What was I 40? I was 45. Was I? What was I? Yeah, 45 when I got my. No, sorry. How was it? 43 when I got my camera. So
Yeah.
I got time to make up.
Absolutely, yeah, 100%. You're going 150 miles an hour now from every single day going forward. And I suppose, look,
Yeah,
we've kind of
yeah,
mentioned
yeah.
a couple of times there during it, but where can people find more information on you?
Yep. So I have 2 websites, but the main one is nztraveladventure.com, which is where all my workshops are. And then I have my own rachelgillespie.co.nz, which is my mentoring website. So yeah, pretty much in any of those for the mentoring. If people wanted to do something like that, they could come here and do it as a full immersion sort of a thing, and then the actual online learning is done on the internet anyway over 12 weeks or so. So, yeah.
Very good. Very good.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been amazing, and excited to meet you one day. I'm sure when you come into New Zealand, we'll take you to some cool glaciers and get some Milky Way somethings.
Yeah, no doubt. You know, like New Zealand is someplace I've wanted to visit for a number of times. Actually, my wife spent around 6 months in total in New Zealand. She was backpacking a number of years ago, and I remember just even looking at the photos she'd taken, travel photos, going, yeah, I'd like to go there. Yeah, I'd like to see that. Yeah, I'd like to see that. So I might just take you up on that someday. And look, and for me, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. What I'll do is I'll put the links as well to your websites in the show notes, so people can actually, click on those and find out more in relation to and see your awesome work, and obviously maybe attend some of the workshops as well that you offer.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic playground that you have there. So look, it's been a pleasure. I always sign out my podcast in an Irish phrase, which is bye for now, and it's Slán go fóill. So from me in Ireland to you in New Zealand, until we meet in person, Slán go fóill.
Thank you.
Hey guys, if you dig what you're hearing, why don't you jump over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Give us a 5-star rating, and don't forget to share with your friends. With all that done, we'll see you next week, and remember, keep shooting.